So, good morning. I was hoping Joe A would be here. Joe B is here because he's the one that asked me to speak to this topic. But a couple months back, the other Joe asked me to address the difference between accepting something or simply settling for something that we aren't thrilled about having in our lives. So, this morning I want to look at that distinction a little bit, get down into the weeds on that a little bit and see if we can bring some clarity to that distinction. Um, and the distinction, actually, as I begin to dig into it, is pretty essential in Buddhism, it turns out. And while both may appear similar, at least outwardly, if I'm accepting something, it may look like it may look like I'm settling, or vice versa, but they really differ significantly in terms of the underlying intentions and outcomes. Acceptance in Buddhism is pretty fundamental to our practice, and it's really rooted in mindfulness and wisdom and recognizing and acknowledging reality as it is without resistance or denial. In other words, seeing things as they truly are rather than how we want them to be, because that's really a fundamental concept. But this is not passivity as we often talk about here. It's not resignation. It's really a clear-eyed understanding of the present moment, what's really going on here. And it involves equanimity, one of the Brahma Viharas, which allows us, equanimity is about accepting life's challenges with balance and clarity. And when we really accept things without too much resistance, doesn't mean we like it, but we accept it. Equanimity is really part of that. So, for example, when faced with some kind of suffering, acceptance would mean acknowledging the suffering without judgment, without aversion, just accepting that's the deal. And again, as I always say here, it doesn't mean we have to like what we are accepting. I think too often in our culture, acceptance implies that we have to like it, but that's not the Buddhist take on it. It's in the first of the Four Noble Truths, recognizing the truth of dukkha or suffering. It's really about accepting the reality of that suffering. And when we do that, we create space to respond more skillfully and respond more passionately, compassionately to our own suffering. We react, instead of reacting out of fear, out of anger, or denial in the face of something that's aversive or causing us suffering. Our path offers insight into accepting what is while developing the capacity for equanimity and the courage for wise action in the face of that situation. And acceptance is an active process, and it is potentially and often always a transformative process because it says see things how they are and then make a decision how to respond. It's not about giving up, but it is about letting go of resistance. It's working with reality to try to create positive change or at least use that reality as a teacher. We can accept a bad outcome while still working to affect a positive or a good outcome, to change the trajectory of whatever's happening. Can't always succeed at that. Now, contrast that with settling, or what I'm going to call complacency. I'm going to just use those two terms interchangeably. That is really a state of stagnation or avoidance. And settling or complacency arises when we are indifferent to a situation, when we get lazy about a situation, when we refuse to engage with the effort that is required for change. That stance of complacency or settling often masquerades as acceptance, but it lacks the mindfulness, it lacks the wisdom that true acceptance embodies. Complacency could be viewed as a form of acceptance, except for the fact that it misses the mark entirely. When we grow complacent, it's a fair bet we're not doing what we need to in order to grow and move forward. We're kind of wallowing in our self-pity. On our path, complacency or settling is actually considered a hindrance to spiritual progress. It's closely related to the five hindrances. It's closely related to sloth and torpor, which are just sort of giving up and doing nothing. It obstructs our insight. It obstructs our seeing things clearly, and it prevents us from engaging with the effort needed to make progress on the path. It is, at the end of the day, a form of avoidance. It is the avoidance of difficulty. And the key difference between acceptance and complacency is the difference between engagement on the one hand and avoidance on the other. Acceptance is an active process that involves engaging with reality, understanding it deeply, and responding skillfully. It requires courage, it requires mindfulness, it requires effort. Settling, on the other hand, is a passive state of avoidance where we refuse to confront the challenges or we refuse to take responsibility for our actions. Think about someone, any of us facing a difficult situation. Acceptance would mean acknowledging the difficulty, looking at its root causes, and taking steps to address it skillfully with wisdom and compassion. Settling or complacency, on the other hand, would mean ignoring the problem, running away from it, putting our head in the sand, or resigning ourselves to it, why bother, or avoiding the effort required to change. In daily life, practicing acceptance means being present with whatever arises, whether it is joyful or whether it is causing suffering, whether we like it or not, whether it's about success or failure. It means letting go of resistance and working with the reality in front of us. So for instance, if I lose a job that I'm working, acceptance would involve acknowledging the loss, feeling the emotions that come with that loss, which are going to be unpleasant, and then taking steps to look for new opportunities or ways to adapt to the change in my life. On the other hand, if I just settle for that reality of losing my job, I might ignore the loss. I might take a position of victimhood. I might refuse to take action. I might resign myself to a sense of helplessness. This lack of engagement in that instance leads to stagnation and nothing but more suffering. So in our practice, as the Buddha taught it, acceptance is a vital part of that which fosters growth, wisdom, and compassion. An active engagement with the reality that allows us to respond skillfully to life's changes. And the result is we suffer less. Complacency or settling, in contrast, is a hindrance. It arises from avoidance. It arises from laziness, prevents us from making progress on the path. It is the path of least resistance. Oh, I'll just go off and sulk. By cultivating mindfulness and the effort it takes to accept something, we learn to distinguish between these two states. We learn to distinguish between complacency or settling and active acceptance. And we choose acceptance as a means of living a more skillful and meaningful life with less suffering. So that's the distinction that Joe A. Asked me to speak to. So let's talk about it.